Welcome to the show, Lamestream Sports, here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall, and you can follow me on Elon Sewer at Braden Gall.
Wow, you've just adopted Jamie's messaging on this the entire way through, haven't you?
No, and do not say his name on this pod. No, I think it's been the mean streets, the mean sewers for a long, long time before he used that phrase. So I don't
got a lot worse last weekend.
Or better.
Or better. My name's Steve Cavendish. You can follow me on all the socials at Cavendish. If you like this show, the one you're listening to right now, please rate it, please review it, please subscribe to it. But mostly, just tell somebody that you know that you listen to Lamestream Sports, and they should too.
So no guest on the show today, and you can also watch this episode if we're on the 440 Sports YouTube page. So if you're over there watching, please give us a thumbs up. If you're listening on the pod feed, please share. Rate, review, all that stuff. We are going to break down SEC Media Days. I don't know if we've ever done this. I've always tried to do something different from SEC Media Days, Steve. We've talked to Scott Ramsey, Executive Director of the Music City Bowl. Last week I talked to, I hope you guys enjoyed that, Daniel Bramlett, Brams, as he's affectionately known, Paul Feinbaum's producer, both on for television, SEC Network, as well as radio. So we've always tried to do something a little different around SEC Media Days, but we've never actually broken down like the actual event itself, what actually is accomplished. Nick Saban walking around by himself for the first time in my life, which was very strange. Like, what do you actually gain? Do commissioners have to answer questions? A lot of stuff. We've never actually broken down the actual event itself, its purpose, and if you're an SEC fan, how different this conference is from the other conferences when it comes to this particular event. So what did we actually accomplish last week, Steve, is what we're going to talk about on the show today.
So was Saban just aimlessly wandering around, or did you like catch a glimpse of Saban as he was like deliberately headed somebody? I find it hard to believe that Saban would be kind of like wandering from place to place at SEC.
I don't think that wandering aimlessly is a phrase I would use to describe Nick Saban at any point in his life. So we'll get to that, and we'll explain my Nick Saban experiences in Dallas-Fort Worth. So before we do that, however, Lamestream Sports is brought to you by the wonderful and amazing folks over at
8th and Roast. Hey, look, I can point to it on the video. Look
there it is. 8th and Roast. 8th and Roast. So here's the great thing about 8th and Roast. They are community servants, Steve. They're community servants. So not only we know about the beans, they're better. We know where you can buy them everywhere. We know that they're hand roasted by my guy Max down at Roasting HQ. They also are coffee experts to help you in your coffee experience. Two things. And
Sherpas.
A Sherpa, yeah, if you will. Yeah. It's my journey, Steve. You know, it's 2024. It's my coffee journey. So I we've always used the brown, like bamboo, like the ones that are supposedly better for the environment, the filters in our drip coffee pot.
Sure.
8th and Roast experts say don't do that. That the white coffee filters don't mess with the flavor of the coffee. They're better for your coffee. That's number one. So if you want better flavored coffee, you got to go that direction.
What if you like a tinge of bamboo in your coffee though?
and like planet Earth? No. Apparently there's not really that much different from a recycling standpoint. They all kind of degrade, but apparently the white filter is the way to go if you want good, clean, crisp tasting coffee. The other thing is I was like, look, I want to grind. I want to grind. That's an interesting statement. I wanted a coffee pot that also has the grinder in it, because my wife's like, look, this coffee pot we use is older than our relationship, which is about 12 years. And she's like, it's time for you to get a new coffee pot. And so I asked my guys at 8th and Roast, I said, what's your advice? And they gave me the exact one to go check out. I went and got it. I got it this morning, Steve. No joke, is the first pot of coffee. It grinds the beans all by itself. It gets the whole pot going. It's all ready to go before I get out of bed and get into the kitchen. One negative, one downside.
It is.
My two daughters come downstairs and go, I hate this coffee machine. Send it back right now, because it woke them up.
Wow.
But
so wait, because it was that loud?
They don't know. That's the point. Get out of I don't have to go up there and be like, "Come on, guys, get your asses out of bed."
Just tell them you'll be teenagers soon enough, and you'll be able to sleep through anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, maybe I'll set it for 6:45 instead of 6:15 this time. we'll see. Anyway, they helped me pick out my coffee pot. They taught me about filters. They brew and roast the best beans. They pick and hand select the best beans. You can buy them all over the county, and there are 4 great locations to go visit. 8th and Roast, everybody.
Go to 8th and Roast.
All right, Steve, you get to take over this episode. You get to play the role.
I have questions.
Let's see if you can keep your questions succinct, though. Let's see.
I have questions. All right, let's start with the let's start with the easy one. It has changed. Media Days is not the, pleasant little 15 people getting together experience that it used to be. It's a monster. How big was it this year?
I think it was less big because Dallas is much further away from Columbia, Athens, Lexington, Gainesville.
Had to fly.
Starkville. Yeah, it was good. It was still big, but I don't think it was like 13 or 1400 media members like it used to be, and at its peak in Hoover. But I think it is. I did feel a more chill energy and vibe. Except for from the Texas and Oklahoma people who have clearly never been to a real Media Days event before.
They've only been to that fake Big 12 Media Days.
Well, what's fascinating, and we'll get to the differences between the conferences because there's a major difference in the SEC and everybody else, and they were not chill. I mean, obviously for obvious reasons, they're very excited. They're very, their fans are excited. Their media are excited.
Are you saying it just meant more to them?
It might have. Here's an example. During the player scrum, so when the coach speaks in the big room and gives his speech, then he takes questions, and then he goes and does another couple small rooms, like a digital room or whatever. And there's about a 15 or 20 minute break, and then the 3 players come into the big room, and there's 3 little tables sort of set up in the corners of this main ballroom so that each player has a scrum with a table and a microphone, and you can go set up. Everyone takes their phones or their cameras, and they go get their questions in, right? Their notepads, their recording, whatever it is. It's a scrum. And the only people that clearly do not understand scrum etiquette are the Oklahoma and Texas people. Because the TV stations, which they have their own room, by the way, the TV stations set up their cameras, like the full TV camera, and the front row of the scrum right in front of the table. So no other reporter, no other person who was trying to get answers, video, or questions could actually see the player. Every other team's TV cameras were set up like 3 or 4 rows back because they know better.
This is why it should never be held in Texas again. This seems awful.
I'm not kidding. They were literally. I was talking to an employee of Oklahoma at one point. I go. What? I was like, "What? Have you guys never been to an SEC Media Day before?" And he looks at me and he goes. I'm sorry, I don't know what they're doing. He's like the team photographer, and the team photographer for Oklahoma could not get shots of the player because the TV cameras were so close to the player. Anyway,
so are they going to rotate?
Yeah, it's in Atlanta. It's in Atlanta next year. Yeah.
Okay. Is it ever going to be back in Nashville?
I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were. What's it like? What's it like trying to get player access in a place this big? They have the teams are bringing people in that they want you to talk to, and they're kind of like their designated representatives. But like, can you have meaningful conversations or get anything meaningful out of players at this thing?
Yes, absolutely you can. Radio Row is different. Radio Row, I'm not sure why Radio Row gets so much individual, like 7 or 8 minute access with like, I don't know why like the Baton Rouge station gets like the Kentucky player. I don't, it's sometimes it reminds me a little bit of the Super Bowl Radio Row, where I actually think going to the Super Bowl is very overrated for a radio station. Like, I don't think people in Nashville are really tuning in to like hear a Seattle Seahawks player pitch something to them. Like, I don't. I wonder the value of some of that stuff. But in the big room, which is where I go to sort of just focus on the players, you can absolutely get what you want. If you got a couple of questions, you can absolutely get them. Now, if it's Jalen Milroe, you may get one question. If it's Brady Cook, you might get 2 questions. If it's Quinn Ewers, you're probably not going to get any questions. So the quarterbacks, I think Ewers and Milroe were the 2 biggest throngs where you could barely even see the guy. Even my video of Milroe is like from far away. But there are some. There was a Vanderbilt player who was sitting at the podium, and I was working on my laptop about like 15 feet away, and no one was talking to him. There was no one over there talking to him.
Aww.
So I felt bad. So I finished up what I was doing.
So you gave him a pity interview?
I did. I closed my laptop. I go over there, and I'm like, well, no, he's a football player in the SEC. He's going to have interesting perspectives on something, and he's at Vanderbilt, so this should be fun. I walk over. I go, hey, I'm from Nashville. I'm Braden. I know a little bit about Clark Lee, and I've talked to him enough times to know sort of like some of the inner details to prove to this player, like, oh, I know what this. I'm not some random like Arkansas radio host who's like parachuting in to like, ask stupid questions. I was like, so can you describe, Clark Lee's sort of communication style and his relationship with his players? Because I know he's got this wall of leadership books in his office that he designates each one individually for players like that. He's told me that before. So I thought, okay, this should be some insight that this offensive lineman should have, this player should have, and he should respond to it. And he was like, yeah, he just like, he gave me like a 3-word answer, and I wasn't prepared for the follow-up. so the follow-up wasn't great by me, and he gave me another terrible answer. So then I'm like, all right, let's make him the expert on him, right? It's like parenting. Like you talk to your you talk to your 8-year-old. You don't ask him questions about like, hey, how was your day? You ask them questions about the thing that they're an expert on, and they're an expert on their own feelings, right? Their own experiences. So that's how you get stuff out of kids. so
offensive linemen
from the smart school in the SEC. so I said to him, I said, well, from your perspective, how different is the game? How different is life as a college athlete? Can you describe what being a college athlete was like when you got into school versus how it is now? How much has the game changed, and what's your perspective on that? This is an open-ended question to allow him to explore his own feelings and experiences. And I swear to God, Steve, he goes, well, I got to pass more tests now. That was it. That was it.
They're sending only their best and brightest.
And he's like he's a perfectly fine, nice kid. And then by that time, like 2 other people had shown up. So I was like, all right, I've done my job. I'm out of here. And I left. But long story short, yes, you can get really good. You can get really good stuff, especially when you find a good talker who's not the star quarterback on a team. Like Alex Huntley for South Carolina, defensive lineman, was awesome. I got like 3 questions with him. There weren't a lot of people around him because he wasn't as highly sought after, not as highly profiled. And you can go get really interesting answers from folks when they're not the star quarterback at Alabama or Texas. And so I got a lot of really good stuff from a lot of really different people. I think you can get the players are the best part, in my opinion. So,
were there any players who were actively on message for whatever their NIL deal was?
I do have one messaging thing from a player standpoint that I want to get to. Remind me to get to that. I think NIL and the EA Sports video game were the 2 biggest things that the players were talking about. There's no question. Yeah. But I think everybody had sort of I think maybe you're right. Maybe that was on message that every player was like, there was always some level of, this wasn't like this when I got here, but I'm okay with people getting theirs. If you take that message, like I'm pro NIL, but I didn't get it when I was a freshman. Like that's sort of, I would say that's the general sense and vibe, because most of these guys are veterans. Most of these guys are upperclassmen. Malachi Moore called himself a pre-NIL baby. He's an All-American safety for Alabama. He's like, I always like to say that I'm a pre-NIL baby. I talked to Huntley actually from South Carolina, and I asked him about the changes in the game, and he was like, well, I see an 18-year-old driving a $100,000 car on campus. I'm like, really? But then I'm like, you know what? You get yours, man. I'm like, that definitely wasn't the way when I was a freshman, but like, I think players deserve whatever they get. And I hope, they're all, of course, pro NIL. So, but there was nobody. There's definitely an element of that wasn't the way it was in my day from like a 22-year-old.
Yeah. It wasn't the way it was in my day 3 years ago.
Right.
but there was nobody there who was like, got a check from Bad Boy Mowers who was like, I spent the summer cutting lawns on a Bad Boy mower and it was really great.
That's a really interesting. So the most interesting NIL comment I've gotten from a player ever was in Atlanta a few years ago, and Will Anderson was at Alabama, and he announced that he had launched a company to help athletes sign and execute NIL deals. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Like, not only are you an entrepreneur, but you're helping other student athletes. That was really interesting. What I find there's no, I mean, outside of like like Caleb Williams, who was on like the Nissan commercials, for being a Heisman Trophy winner, there's not a lot of national brands that are advertising. So a lot of these, I don't remember. Maybe the SEC put in a rule that said you're not allowed to pitch. I don't know, but there was not a single mention of an advertiser or a client of any kind. And my guess is, one, the SEC doesn't want that, but two, that all of the local advertising doesn't apply to the audience that's consuming the content, right? So, like, if you're a Alabama player and you're sponsored by a barbecue joint in Birmingham, like, what good does that do you to go on Knoxville radio and pitch that? So if I was an advertiser, I wouldn't pay for that.
But if you're like Quinn Ewers, and who has probably has like a couple of national deals,
I don't. Maybe the SEC has a rule. Maybe I missed that, but I did not hear a single pitch.
Isn't Quinn Ewers on the front of the box this year?
He is. He is.
How much buzz was there among the players about the game? Because the game was starting to be released last week.
So it was released in the middle of the week, and one of the guys, one of my buddies, shout out John Neighbors from Arkansas, went and got took an Uber to Target or wherever, big box store, and bought a television and brought it to his table on Radio Row, and because the game came out middle of the week, he brought his console and got the game and bought a television and had it set up on Radio Row, and media and players were all over there playing it the whole time. Now, I did not pick up a controller because I've been on the wagon for 13 years. And if I pick up the controller for 1 second, I will go on a bender in which I don't see my family for months. And so I'm not going to touch it. I know where I need to be on this. What I thought was interesting is that every player talked about it, but every player talked about it in a different way. They all had their own reasons. Luther Burden, maybe the best receiver in America, said he was pissed off about his player rating. He was like he was like a 93, which is like the 11th best player in the game and the number one receiver. And he's like, should have been higher. Just something to motivate me. Like, so he was using it as like motivation, even though he was clearly like.
He's gonna go torch some school this year and be and tell them it was basically EA's fault that I hit you for
somebody immediately asked him, like, well, have you played it with yourself? And he's like, oh yeah. And he goes, what did you think? And he goes, like, I'm a freak out there. Which is great. You got to have some ego.
Did everybody know their player ratings?
I think so. And you got to have some ego if you're going to be an elite number one wide receiver in the NFL, which Luther Burden will be. Malachi Moore told me, he goes, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm just playing it to make sure to decide what I'm going to wear on Saturdays. So it's like, okay, Alabama's playing at LSU this weekend. He can play the game, decorate himself how he wants to, the wristbands and the face guard and do the whole deal. And he's like, oh, that doesn't look as good with the LSU Tigers at Baton Rouge. I'm going to change it up and do something different. So like, it was just fascinating, but they were obsessed. Kirby Smart told a story about how he talked to his players on the plane about the game. And he's like, oh, have y'all gone to pick up the game yet? Have y'all gone to buy it? And the players all just fell out laughing and looked at him like, Coach, you don't go buy the game at stores anymore.
You don't go get the case.
No, it's just that you just download it. You just buy it online. It's fine.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. How was Sankey?
So Sankey was good. He's always got his propaganda speech, which I think is what you're supposed to do as a commissioner. But he did inject some. This was the Monday following the attempt, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and he writes a lot of his own stuff. He has his PR team look at it, but I know for a fact that he writes almost all of his own stuff. his speeches, and he clearly, about 3/4 of the way through the speech, he injected about a 4-minute little, aside to the events of the weekend and how college football fans are all different types of people, and we should be a community that comes together over the things that we love, liberal or conservative, Democrat, Republican, etc. And at first I was like, I don't know what the point with that. Like, why would you do like that? Seems like you're, whatever. But I think the more I thought about it, Steve, the more I think that the SEC as an entity culturally has major significance to a lot of people. And if you're going to be the main guy, the lead spokesperson and CEO of something so culturally significant, and you have an opportunity less than 36 hours after one of the craziest things I've ever seen as an adult in this country to sort of tell folks, hey, let's chill the fuck out, was basically his message, knowing full well that his audience probably leans extremely conservative in general. I kind of was like, okay, I see you, Greg Sankey. I think that was probably the right thing to do. It wasn't long, and it wasn't inflammatory in any way, but I thought that was the right thing to do. I think the issue with Greg Sankey and all commissioners at these events is that in the big room you get a 15 to 20 minute Q&A, and there's a time frame on it, and he's going to get a bunch of really bad questions from a bunch of local, hacks isn't the right word, but that's not it. But you're going to get beat writers from Starkville and Fayetteville and Gainesville and College Station asking beat writer-ish questions.
Well, and very kind of niche questions to what they're writing about, as opposed to pressing him on issues with the conference, issues with ESPN or CBS or whoever else.
Right. So like if I'm and the folks that I've known for a long time in my career, and this is not meant to be like, I'm not name dropping these folks. It's just sort of the circle I worked in when I worked on for all my jobs. Like I've known Ralph Russo for a long, long time. He's a good friend. Go Mets, by the way. He's the guy in charge of the AP. He's the national AP reporter for college football. He has really important questions. Ross Dellinger has been all over this stuff, like the ACC lawsuits, and like he's breaking all kinds of news. Pat Forty is there, and Andy Staples is there. Like these guys have very legitimate sort of like big picture questions. And Sankey was asked about the expansion, right, and about the lawsuits, and he kind of gave an answer that got some eyebrows raised when he was like, "We're focused on the 16 we've got now," and everyone's like, "Now?" So there was one question in there.
That's a very my team's on the field. Yes. Or my team's on the court sort of feeling to it.
And honestly, like it was just I wish, because Sankey does a lot of radio stuff, but he doesn't do the way the coaches will do a local breakout before. They'll do a local session with like the 4 or 5 beat writers that are the guys that are there, the men and women that are there covering the team pretty closely. That's where you get the real stuff. Like that's where Kirby said, hey, we're fining players now for driving too fast instead of suspending them. Like you'll get something out of a coach. Yeah, exactly. We can discuss that. They have these little private media sessions that happen sort of in private that aren't in any rooms, that happen before they go into the big room. That's where you actually can ask Josh Heupel a question, or Kirby Smart a question, because you're on the beat and he kind of has a relationship with you and you get invited to that. That's a very private thing. Sankey doesn't do that. Like he doesn't have one of those. And so all he's got to do is sort of milk that 20 minutes. And if he gets one tough question in 20 minutes, that's what you get. And so that's the same everywhere. Although I do think that Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, did a better job of sort of stepping off to the side and doing a smaller scrum where he took tougher questions. And actually, that's where you got a lot of the good audio and the good questions and the good answers from Brett Yormark during Big 12 media days, was when he stepped off to the side after the big Q&A, and like the 4 or 5 national guys that are there, are asking questions, Brett McMurphy and Dennis Dodd and like that whole crew of folks. So Sankey does not have to do that. Neither does Tony Petitti, from the Big Ten. The 2 big conferences don't have to do that.
I wonder, there's a lot of information going in a lot of different directions. To your point, there's these private sessions that are happening with locals, and there's news that's coming up out of that is relevant to other people around the SEC. To wit, the Kirby remarks about speeding. How does how does all of that filter up and out? Because I mean, are you essentially kind of have to stay on alert for everybody else's work for a week to see the stuff that didn't come through a big stage, for instance?
And yes, the short answer to your question is yes. But for in that situation, for example, Kirby did that little breakout. He did not get asked about, like, they've had, like, I don't know what the number is, so don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's like 28 arrests for reckless driving in the last like 3 years, something insane. Somebody literally, there was the tragedy, of course,
Not much to do in Athens.
Well, I disagree, actually. That's a bad take by you. Athens is wonderful. But like I was talking to Seth Emerson, and he's like, I'm afraid it's on you can go watch the video on YouTube. I had a little 5-minute conversation with him, and he's like, I live in Athens. I have family. My kids are I don't want to drive around Athens either because like I'm scared. But what happened is they got that quote from Kirby in the little scrum before. So they come back out to the big room. He immediately goes to the podium, and it's not out there yet. Like, it doesn't get to the folks to ask the questions in the big. So Kirby was not asked one time in the big room about this issue with his team, but he did answer it in the small breakout but no one, it's a private session. So literally it's like if one of the 4 or 5 people tweets it, then we'll know about it and we can ask Kirby a question, but Kirby was not asked. In the main interview room, he was not asked about any of the stuff that's been going on with his team. And that, to me, that's getting off easy, in my opinion.
So to that point, what are changes that media could make that would surface more information like this? Like, for instance,
how much time you have?
Well,
would you like me to discuss the internet and how we can fix the internet?
Well, I mean, would, for instance, and the answer is no, because there's too much ego involved. Is there a way to, for instance, designate, okay, we're gonna let 3 people ask questions of Sankey?
So the way that the way it kind of works,
yeah.
So in a local presser around the Titans, for example,
Right.
you kind of know, you have a quick little, hey, are you going to ask this? Okay, are you going to ask that? Okay, like even last year at Media Days, I was sitting with Teresa Walker, and I think it was Rex Road, maybe. It was like me, Rex Road, and Teresa. I can't remember who it was. And somebody's like, hey, we need to ask about this. And the other person was like, hey, I'll ask about this. And so that was one of the few times in a big setting like that where you have hundreds of people where you could actually coordinate. But that's because it was local Nashville people asking in a Nashville setting about the commissioner, about Nashville. And so they kind of coordinated in that kind of room, in that kind of setting. You can't coordinate. You've got, there's just like, and especially with Texas and Oklahoma now joining, so you have 16 markets trying to ask questions. Not even every market's going to get a question, and most of the questions are like, hey, what does having the Cotton Bowl in the conference mean to you? It's like, and he's like, well, it's a prestigious event, so.
Did you notice any differentiation in the Texas media market? Because obviously there's the Austin guys, but Dallas and Houston and other like kind of huge markets all have Texas interest.
Well, and Dallas covering it. Honestly, Dallas is like an Oklahoma market as much as it is a Dallas market or a Texas market, but no different. But I also know a lot of those folks. Like Kirk Bowles is a great reporter. If you're an SEC fan and you want to listen and you want to read about Texas content, Kirk Bowles has written for the Austin American Statesman since literally 1995 when I was going to middle school in Austin, Texas. And I say that as a compliment, Kirk. But like, so I've known a lot of these folks for a long time, and just because of, again, I worked for when I worked for Rivals and Athlon and Sirius, I interviewed almost all of these folks. Anwar Richardson's a really great reporter. Josh McQuiston is a really great reporter covering Oklahoma. Dean Blevins has been in TV in Norman for a long, long time. Like there's a lot of guys that I sort of know. It's not really any different. The fact that they were a little bit more excited to be in the SEC and like their camera setups were stupid. Other than that, I don't think there was not really any difference. It was just hot as hell in Dallas.
After Lane did the drive-by shooting on your boy Feinbaum, what was the atmosphere like around Lane last week?
So you know who followed him on the Feinbaum show, right? Me.
No. Oh,
Me. I was on.
I missed that.
I was on the next segment. Thanks for turning it off right when it got good.
I only saw the video clips.
And we can get to the Saban thing here too, but Lane and Kirby smart to a lesser extent. Kirby knows that he's sort of filling the vacuum left by Saban, and it feels like he sort of understands that now, and that he's comfortable with the role of like, I'm the elder statesman of the best program and the best staff and the best team. I've got to fill that role. Lane is sort of filling the Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban role, where it's about his personality and about, he kind of behaves like Nick Saban in a press conference setting, but he kind of acts like Jim Harbaugh on Twitter and during games. But I think him and Kirby are filling the vacuum left by Harbaugh and Saban. And I think what's interesting is Saban being there, like in the room for all their speeches, made for a very interesting dynamic. Kiffin also, of course, lost his father the week before. Monty Kiffin passed away. And I saw a very different Lane Kiffin, like pretty much soaked in emotion. He didn't get emotional, but you could tell he was weighed down pretty heavily, as anybody would be. And so in the big room, he was just kind of Lane Kiffin. He goes to the digital room, which is smaller, and was asked specifically about his father. He gets a little emotional about that, but then he's asked, and you could tell he didn't want to talk about that. But then he's asked about the decision Nick Saban made to hire him. And he got pretty emotional about, and this is all Monday during the day. He gets really emotional about how old coaches don't refuse to evolve. Old coaches don't like to change. Old coaches refuse to modify things. But he took a chance on me. He risked his program on me, and I would not be here today without Nick Saban taking a risk and a chance on me at a time in my life where I desperately needed some help and direction. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said, which is like a pretty open and honest and interesting answer from a guy who's like a Twitter troll a lot of the time. And that's not his personality in real life, just so people know. And then he goes to Feinbaum. So he's kind of gone through the car wash at this time. And then he goes to Feinbaum at 4:40 p.m. Central Standard God's time, and does a hit with Feinbaum. And I'm standing there literally 8 feet away the entire time. And he is getting emotional. He's kind of attacking Paul for like getting him fired at USC. Like, so much good stuff comes out of that interview. It is a phenomenal interview. And Lane steps down off the thing, and I said, hey Lane, how are you? And he kind of, everybody just sort of like does a, hi, how are you? And then they kind of move on. And I jump up on the set, and they're putting the earbuds in me, and I'm getting all situated and sitting in the chair. And I'm like, I look at Paul, and I'm like, I got to follow that shit. And and he's like, that was really, really good. That's as good as Kiffin. That's as good as Kiffin has ever been. And I was like, damn it. And
so how would you rate your segment?
Well, I had to do something crazy, so I had to like go at the callers. Like, I had to go a totally different direction. I had to go heel turn. Like I had to go, like, you can't compete with Lane Kiffin on my father passed away. Nick Saban gave me a chance in life, and here I am with a team that's poised to make a playoff run at a championship, and the emotion of all of that with the relationship that he has with Paul. I can't go same direction. So I've got to go a different direction. So I was like,
you went at callers.
Well, he and I had talked about it, so we were kind of setting it up. And I was like, I go, has has anyone seen Jim in Tuscaloosa and I-Man in the same place at the same time? Can we confirm that they are two different people? And which absolutely makes Jim in Tuscaloosa furious. And so I knew that I had to go a totally different direction than trying to play up to the, what was the story of the day? Well, Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban, like that was the story. So I couldn't tell it better than the guy who's told it last segment.
Is everybody as excited about having Saban kind of be on this side of the mic as I am? I mean, I look at him a lot like I look at, coincidentally, Belichick is on the side of the mic now too, and he's really fucking good.
Shocking.
Is everybody else as excited about Saban listening to Saban as they are kind of, for when he was a coach?
What's fascinating about the media folks is you don't, because you're so focused on trying to like capture as much shit as possible in like the 3.5 or 4 days you're there. It's only like when you're having a beer at dinner where you sort of start to like be a football fan again. Does that make sense? And I think from a fan standpoint, all these guys, myself included, men and women, who've gotten into this business because we love college football in the first place, and we love talking about Florida's defensive line and Tennessee's quarterback and, whatever. You don't really do that stuff until like you've had a couple beers and you're throwing footballs at bowling pins, and like all of a sudden you're like, God, I can't wait for that Texas A&M game. Like I can't wait to see what Nick Saban does on game day. Like you don't really get to the fan stuff until you're kind of off the clock and when you're networking. And I think everyone is ecstatic about this. I think I did not see any of his on-air content because I was like in the room and you can't hear them talking. You can't see the broadcast. And I'm not going back to rewatch it all, but I am excited about Saban being a part of it. But what was interesting is I was standing in a side hallway and Kalen DeBoer is about 15 feet away and he's doing like a little stand-up hit on TV, and then he gets done. And I'm talking to somebody, from like a producer type, and Nick Saban walks by and like Kalen DeBoer gives him like a nod and Saban gives him a nod. But Saban's just like walking through the hallway by himself. He walked kind of right past me and I kind of look and I say, Nick, and he just goes, and he doesn't know who I am. He's just like, nodding heads, and because like he knows that everyone knows who he is.
Right.
And he's just like walking by like an old guy with a briefcase. And the reason that's so weird is he had to go to the bathroom with police before this. They would
Did he have any security there?
No, they would close the bathrooms. 2 guards would stand outside the bathroom when Nick Saban went to the bathroom, and you could not go into the bathroom. Everywhere he went, he had a police entourage with him at every media days I've been to with him. To see him just walking down the hallway by himself, just like walking through like an old guy in the hallway, was very surreal for me personally.
Did you want to go to the bathroom with Nick Saban?
No, I did not. Shockingly. I'll take him to 8th and Roast, though. If you want me to take him to 8th and Roast, I'll take him there. I'd love to go have a cup of coffee with Nick Saban at 8th and Roast. Best cup of coffee in Nashville. Come on down, Nick.
Nice segue.
Belichick's got a house here. When you're up here visiting your buddy Belichick, I'll take you out to 8th and Roast, and I'll get you a great cup of coffee. I'll even send you home with a free bag of beans, Nick Saban. I will give you a bag of beans on the house from me if you want to come to 8th and Roast. No, Saban is going to be fascinating. I think people are super interested, but to see him sort of just being him, I think he is very happy not having all the stuff around him. He looked lighter for sure.
The interesting thing, and I've seen this in some of the Belichick interviews as well, is he gets to talk football, but doesn't have any of the stress that's involved with it.
Yeah.
Like he just gets to do some of the fun stuff, not have to worry about consequences or worry about, am I going to be able to get enough of my second string defense in to get them reps before conference play starts and blah 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 blah. Let
me ask you, because we had at the Big 12 media days, Ollie Gordon, who's a first team All-American running back. Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State brought him to media days because he just got a DUI, but he's the best player at his position in the country. So he was there at media days and had to answer questions, which I think is the right decision to bring him there and let him ask questions. The wrong decision, of course, is Mike Gundy telling everybody that he's probably driven home after drinking a few beers thousands of times in his life. That's the problem. But in his mad scientist genius kind of way, took all the spotlight off of his DUI'd running back who's not going to get suspended. So
right.
I don't know. But here's ultimately, I say all that to say Oklahoma State made a decision to bring him, knowing that it was probably going to get some headlines and be a big talking thing. But they couldn't say no to bringing him, because I don't think if you do that, you make him look scared. You look scared. I don't think it's a good look to not bring him. And you got to trust that he handled himself, and he handled himself well. It's the 55-year-old that didn't handle himself well.
And the issue's now over.
Exactly. So here's my question to you, though. Would you have brought Nico Iamaleava if you were Tennessee? Would you have brought him? Because it would have been a huge media throng, and he would have taken all the oxygen away from the team conversation. But he's also a big star, and he doesn't get, there's not a lot of interviews with him. So would you have brought Josh? I think Josh Heupel decided I'm not bringing Nico because I want to focus on some guys that aren't going to say anything, who are veteran leaders, and they all were good talkers, and they gave great answers. Amari Thomas is great, by the way, 2 years in a row. And the focus was sort of, we're going to stay under the radar. We're going to be, we don't want the spotlight yet. We're not there yet. And I think that was the strategy behind not bringing him. I'm curious if you would have brought him?
I don't know that I would have, and I for the same reason that some programs don't make freshmen available or don't make underclassmen available for media. And while we in the media think that's kind of horseshit, it does allow you to shelter them a little bit more and allow them to learn and allow them to kind of be in safe places is a bad way to say this, but I mean, he's going to be a media figure now because he's the starting quarterback at the University of Tennessee. He's going to also be that for the next maybe 2 years. So
I would say he'll be at media days next year, and then he'll be in the NFL the following year.
Probably so.
I think you get 2 years of Nico starting probably.
Yeah, and so he's going to have it next year. My guess is they had a conversation with Nico, and they weren't just like, "Hey, we're not sending you."
And Cooper Mays is a veteran offensive lineman, been through a lot. Perfect.
I mean, they had good people to send too. It's not like they did. It's not like they sent a bunch of stiffs.
No, Amari Thomas is awesome defensive lineman. He's he wants to be a broadcaster. He's great. Second year he's been there. Keenan Peely is a linebacker who's been in college for like 7 years, I think. So like they because he was at BYU and I think he went on his Mormon mission. I think he came back and then he transferred to Tennessee. So they had guys that are like fully formed adults. So, right. And they were able to talk, be interesting without saying a whole lot. And I think Tennessee likes the fact that I think there's a few teams, LSU, Tennessee, Missouri. I think there's a few teams that like the fact that they are not being picked in the top 4. They like the fact that the spotlight's on Texas and Ole Miss. And I think they like that. And I think that's good for those teams. So Brady Cook and Missouri was very open about it. Like, all of our adversity is why we were good last year, and we're just using it to be, they're good with that, I think. So,
if media days continues to be kind of bigger and less accessible than it used to be, is it still worth it to go for the networking?
For me personally, yes. Especially as someone who's an ESPN employee, and I get to interact with people that I don't normally get to interact with. I'll be very candid. Like getting to spend time with the SEC Network executive producers is good for me. Like it just is. Yeah. And so, yes, I think it is, meeting. I think the other thing is for me personally, and not to give away too much here, but like cultivating sources inside the SEC office is pretty big. That's a big one where I just get to continue to build a relationship with like a bunch of folks inside the SEC office. And that's good to have. So I think, yes, the answer for an individual is good. If I own a radio station in Charleston or, wherever, I don't know. I don't know how much you get out of it. It's also not a huge investment, a couple $1,000 to break off, to send to your couple guys to, for a couple weeks. I don't know. I don't think it's that much of investment for the amount of content and FaceTime you get, but you don't really get a whole lot. It's not. The networking individually is just as important. I do think there needs to be a fan, and I did talk to somebody from the SEC about this. I do think there needs to be a fan element involved. I've said this for years. If you could make it about kids meeting their favorite players, you would make your conference look really good. Make it a fan fest, have kids get autographs for free from like their favorite football players. I think you'd win a lot of people over with the event. Media would hate that because it would take up their time. But I think you would win a lot of folks over. I think Nashville's a great place for that, for example, to do that. But otherwise, it's not like that at every other conference either, Steve. Like I've been to the Big Ten media event where like you could just stand in the hallway and talk to Kirk Ferentz and Mark D'Antonio and Melvin Gordon. I'm just going to talk to Melvin Gordon for like 10 minutes about like where he's like why am I Jim Delaney? One time I saw Jim Delaney just like walking around. I just walk up and you just start chatting with him for 10 minutes. You're like
former OVC commissioner Jim Delaney.
Also, I would argue the most powerful man in college football for about 20 years. And just getting to chat with him off the record, just on the side, that's not how it works in the SEC. Like at one point in the Big Ten, I think there were like 8 coaches in a room sitting at tables and they're like, go. And you just walk in and sit down and start talking to these guys, and you can record if you want to. Like it's It's on the record. Like it's available. The Pac-12 media days was famously just on couches under palm trees, like outside of like a Hollywood studio. Like you would just sit on like, oh, there's Mike Leach on a couch. Go talk to Mike Leach for a few minutes. The Big East used to do a clam bake in Newport, Rhode Island.
I remember this.
And you'd go out to the clam bake and you'd be drinking beers with the coaches. So it's the SEC is very different. It takes itself way too seriously because it is the biggest, most covered league. And the coaches know that, and the players know that, and they are prepared to not show a lot of personality, which does kind of suck. Eli Drinkowitz did a pretty good job. He shows personality. Lane Kiffin does as well. But basically, it's designed to sort of like car wash it, get your talking points, get through, get back on the plane, get back home. I do know for a fact, and I don't know how many teams did this, that the only thing that players were prepared with talking points wise was the politics. And I don't honestly think I saw a single player from a single team get asked about it. And I don't know if that's a failure on us or a success on us.
I think that's a huge success.
I think it's a success that
I don't need to know what Tennessee's center thinks about somebody taking a shot at a presidential candidate.
Well, and honestly, I could have seen one person being tasked with doing that for like every player, you know. And I'm glad there wasn't. Where like yeah, you walk up and you okay, here's I don't know, here's a defensive lineman from Texas. Like, what'd you think of the assassination attempt on our president? Like, no. So I don't think a single player was asked that, but I do know from multiple schools that players that was like one of the one questions where they had pre-planned statements and talking points ready to go.
All right. So last question here. The
8th and Roast, everybody.
8th and Roast. Go to 8th and Roast. So,
don't shoot people. Go to 8th and Roast.
I'm sure they appreciate that message. If
nothing wrong with that message.
If Lane is Lane and excerpt him from this answer, who's the coach who improved their stock the most with the media at media days?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't think anybody's stock changed dramatically. I could probably give you a few different answers. The fact that Brian Kelly didn't say anything kind of funny, like funny,
unintentionally
meaning like,
funny.
Yeah, unintentionally. Like that's probably a positive for him. I think Eli Drinkowitz is way more comfortable in his skin after an 11-2 season, after multiple 6-6 seasons, and is probably one of the more interesting personalities of the like he kind of lets himself show a little bit more than everybody, and I think that's earning him some. It does help to go 11-2 and have the greatest season in school history, but and bring your quarterback and receiver back. Heupel's just Heupel, like he's just Coach Dad, and he doesn't say anything. I think Elko won a lot of people over that didn't know that he was that good, but I think people that have covered him at Duke and A&M before know that he's that good and talented, and is going to do a great job at Texas A&M. I think Sarkisian has matured and developed a lot in his journey since he was fired from USC with like drinking problems and now sober and clean and running one of the best programs in all of college football. And now joining the SEC, he came in with a lot of gusto and he's very confident in his team as well. Jeff Lebby is a monster of a human being if you've never been around him, and he's just like a big man. he's huge. Let me see. Kirby didn't nothing with Kirby. Kalen DeBoer is, I think he's still finding himself. I don't know. I think the answer might be Eli Drinkowitz. I think maybe that he might be the guy that is sort of, from a personality standpoint, people want to cover him more. And nice
to be off the hot seat. I'm sure he has. I'm sure he is liberated after the year he had last year.
I will say. This is why you go all the way to the end. This is why you go all the way to the end.
Wow.
There was one coach. This is a trivia question. We can end it here. There was one coach who was down in the lobby after hours. And there's a bar down there with all the media. There's only one of all the 16. And I want to see if you can guess who that was. Universally, there's some fairly universal feelings about this individual at SEC Media Days.
It wasn't Stoops, was it?
No, he was. I will admit, I was not. I was on a plane when Mark Stoops was at the podium. He was the
By
very
design?
last. He was the very last coach to speak on Thursday, and that is the toughest. One time Vanderbilt was in that last slot, and that is absolutely.
You're
it's
just
like
begging for
it's
people not to cover
debilitating.
you.
Yeah, the room's empty. It's really sad to see. So this is an easy. This is an easy answer. Who's the one guy with burners who likes the DM media members? Who's the one guy who you would expect to be down there in a bar with media members at 11:30 at night? Who do you think is down there? Hugh Freeze.
Jesus. I'm sure he was drinking club soda.
Never change, Hugh. Never change.
He was drinking club soda, right?
Yes, exactly. You know what he should be drinking? Eighth and
Eighth and
roast coffee, baby. Eighth and roast coffee. So make sure you pick up some Eighth and roast coffee. Steve Cavendish, where can people find you?
They can find me at Cavendish on the socials or at NashvilleBanner.com for all of your Nashville local news needs.
There you have it. You can get to me at Braden Gall. Make sure you swing by Eighth and Roast, of course, everybody. Eighth and Roast coffee. Fantastic. Best roasted beans in the entire city. 4 great locations across the city. Obviously, we love Eighth and Roast. So go support Eighth and Roast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hanging out. This has been Lamestream Sports here on the 440 Sports Network.